Who are you in this life? Have you ever sat alone in the dark asking yourself, what am I doing wrong that I know deep down, but I'm too scared to fix? Not just a passing thought, but a question that rips through your chest like a knife, tearing apart the mask you've worn to hide the bitter truth about who you are. That's the question Jordan Peterson, a psychologist, a thinker, a man who's pulled millions from the edge of despair, threw at me through a tiny screen in Steven Bartlett's cozy kitchen on the Diary of a CEO podcast. His voice wasn't soft or comforting. It was deep like a growl from the bottom of the ocean, sharp enough to slice through every excuse I'd ever made to fool myself. I tried it. I sat down, turned off the lights, and let that question choke me. The answer hit me like a punch to the face. I was living a fake life and I'd known it for years, but I was too terrified to change. Picture this. You're standing in front of an iron door, cold, heavy, locked tight with rusty chains called fear, shame, and avoidance. Behind that door is the real you, not the shadow you show off on social media, not the forced smile you plaster on for friends, not the broken soul you see in the mirror every morning but pretend isn't there. To open it, you've got to break those locks, but breaking them means facing what you've buried, dreams you've killed, pain you've stuffed down, lies you've told yourself to get through the day. I stood there, my hand shaking on the handle, my heart pounding like it wanted to burst out of my chest. A whisper screamed in my head, open it or stay trapped in this cage forever. Are you brave enough to turn that key? Or would you rather stand still, letting the silence swallow you whole? That interview between Peterson and Bartlett wasn't just a chat. It was a surgery on the soul, peeling back the layers of two men who'd faced their own messes. Steven Bartlett, a young guy who built an empire from nothing, sat there with teary eyes admitting, I used to wear a mask in every relationship. I tried to be who I thought people wanted, not me. But when I took it off, when I spoke my truth, that's when my life started. His words didn't just echo, they stabbed me, forcing me to look at my own life. I'd worn masks too. Masks of strength, of success, of I'm fine, but underneath I was a walking corpse, exhausted from pretending. Are you wearing a mask right now? Or have you forgotten it's not your real face? Peterson, his eyes full of pain and grit, hit back with a truth that cuts. If you're not honest, you don't get the adventure of your life. You get a script, someone else's script, and you play it out till it sucks every ounce of meaning from your bones, leaving you empty and lost. That wasn't advice. It was a warning, a curse for anyone dumb enough to live a lie. I used to think I was free to choose this job, this life, this way of being. But sitting in the dark, I felt the invisible chains around my neck, my parents' hopes that I'd make it, society's pressure to settle down, my own terror that if I wasn't perfect, I'd be left behind. Those chains clanked. Every time I tried to move, reminding me I wasn't the one calling the shots. Do you feel your chains? Or have you gotten so used to them you think they're your heartbeat? Your life isn't a joke, but you're turning it into a prison. Think of your life as a house. If you build it on sand, on lies like I'm okay, I'm happy, I don't need to change, then when the storm hits, when loss or failure or pain crashes in, that house will collapse in a heartbeat. You'll be left standing, in the rubble, empty-handed with no clue who you are or where to start. Peterson calls that hell, not death, but the punishment of your own conscience when you know you've wasted your life and didn't fight to fix it. I've seen that hell in a friend's eyes. He knew his soul-crushing job was killing him, coming home every day with dead eyes, drowning in whiskey every night to forget. One time he sat across from me, tears rolling down his face, and whispered, I don't know who I am anymore. I'm gone, but my body doesn't know it yet. I hugged him, but I couldn't pull him out of the hole he'd dug himself. Are you digging your own hole? Or do you still think closing your eyes will make it all go away? I took Peterson's test, not because I wanted to, but because I had no way out. One night when the world went quiet, I sat on my bed, killed the lights, and let the darkness wrap around me like a cold, heavy blanket. I took a deep breath, feeling the air press on my chest, and whispered, what am I doing wrong that I know about, that I can fix, and that I'm willing to fix? The room felt like it was crushing me. The answer didn't come fast. It lurked in the shadows like a wild animal, waiting for me to grow the guts to look it in the eye. Then it pounced, roaring, "You're running from your dreams, you know. You want to write, to create, to leave a mark. But you're hiding in a dead-end job because you're scared to fail, scared to be laughed at, scared no one will care." I didn't cry right away. I sat there, stunned, feeling like someone had ripped my chest open to show me a bleeding heart. Then the tears came, not from sadness, but because I knew it was true. A truth I'd buried under 1,000 excuses, 1,000 days of living like a ghost. The truth doesn't forgive, but it sets you free. Peterson says when you ask that question, the answer won't come like an angel with soft wings. It'll come like a ghost, cold and brutal, but real. For me, it was admitting I'd thrown away years trying to please everyone else, living a life I didn't pick. I used to think grinding at a job, smiling through it, pretending everything was fine was enough, but I was wrong. Life's not a game you win by faking it. It's a fight, and if you don't grab your sword, if you don't face yourself, you'll lose not to anyone else but to your own soul screaming at you to wake up. Try this. Face the darkness. Tonight, take 20 minutes. No phone, no lights, just you and the quiet. Sit on your bed, on the floor, anywhere you feel alone. Breathe deep. Feel the air fill your lungs like a cold wave and ask, what am I doing wrong that I know about, that I can fix and that I'm willing to fix? Don't rush it. Let the question sink into you. Let it dig up the stuff you've buried. When the answer hits, and it will, whether you like it or not, write it down. Even if your hand shakes, even if tears blur the ink, write it. Then pick one small thing to start fixing. Clean your desk, call someone you've ignored, admit to someone I'm not okay. For me, it was writing that first page after years of stalling. For you, it might be saying no to something you've always said yes to, or confessing you're struggling. That's your first step to figuring out who you really are. That talk between Peterson and Bartlett wasn't a story to hear and forget. It was a wake-up call, a yell to snap you out of your fake dream. They tore themselves open to show you, you're not alone in this fight. In the next parts, I'll take you deeper, from the truth that breaks your heart, to the mask that traps you, to the journey of seeing yourself raw and real. This isn't just a book to read. It's a sword to pick up and free yourself with. Your question, what's holding you back right now? Write it down, even just a word, even if it scares you, and ask, am I brave enough to face it? Next part, I'll tell you how the truth saved me from a fake relationship, and how it can smash the chains you've locked around your own neck. Are you ready to swing your sword? Part 2, the truth. The key to unlocking your life's journey. If you don't tell the truth, you're choking the life out of yourself. Peterson warned me, and I proved it by letting myself die slowly in a fake relationship, where every lie was a knife I stabbed into my own heart. Picture this. You're stuck in a dark room, walls closing in, no windows, no way out. Just you and the echoes of the lies you've told, each one whipping your skin like a lash. I'm fine, you say, even though your heart's bleeding. I'm happy, you smile even though your eyes are drowning. I love you, you whisper, even though inside there's nothing but a cold, empty graveyard. I lived in that room for 4 years, wearing a perfect mask to hide that I was falling apart. Not because of anyone else, but because I couldn't face myself. Are you trapped in a room like that? Or have you gotten so used to the dark you think it's light? In that tear-soaked interview with Steven Bartlett, Jordan Peterson sat there, his voice heavy like a death knell, his eyes sharp enough to cut through every wall I'd built. He said, if you're not honest, you're twisting the compass that guides you through this brutal world. Do you really want to do that? It wasn't a gentle tip. It was an accusation, a sentence for anyone dumb enough to live a lie. Steven, raw and real, poured out his own story. I used to wear a mask in my relationships. I tried to be what I thought they wanted, not me. But when I ripped it off, when I spoke my truth, even as that relationship was crumbling, it got stronger than ever. His words didn't just hit me, they punched me, forcing me to stare at the wreckage I called my life. I was a liar too, lying to my partner, my friends, myself. And every lie was a brick in the wall keeping me from freedom. The truth isn't a warm hug. It's a monster you've got to face if you want to live. It doesn't show up in a pretty box with a red bow and sweet words. It crashes in like a hulking shadow, growling in your face, its red eyes boring into your soul, making you kneel and admit what you've dodged. For me, the truth was admitting I didn't love him anymore. Not because he was bad, but because I'd lost myself trying to keep him happy. I remember the day I said it. We sat across from each other in the living room, the air so thick it could choke us both. I took a deep breath, my lungs burning, and said, "I'm not happy. I can't keep going like this." He stared at me, eyes wide with shock, and asked, "Why didn't you say it sooner?" I couldn't answer because I knew why. I was scared. Scared he'd leave. Scared I'd be alone. Scared I wasn't good enough to be loved without pretending. But when I let the truth spill out, raw and ugly, something wild happened. He didn't walk away. He hugged me, and for the first time in 4 years, I felt he saw me. Not the mask, but me, broken and real. Are you brave enough to let your truth out? Or are you still scared it'll shatter everything? Peterson says the truth is the bedrock of every relationship. With others, sure, but more importantly, with yourself. If you lie, he warned, you're throwing off your compass in a world full of storms. When the wind hits, you'll be lost, and no one can save you, not even you. I used to think lying kept the peace. If I stayed quiet about my loneliness, if I faked that everything was okay, I'd dodge fights. I'd be loved. But I was dead wrong. Every lie built a wall between me and them, and between me and me. The day I tore off that mask, the day I owned my truth, that wall came crashing down, and I saw, the truth doesn't destroy, it builds. Are you stacking bricks around yourself? Or are you ready to smash them down? Why are we so terrified of the truth? Because it costs you. A price so steep it makes you shake just thinking about it. The truth demands you ditch the cozy lies you've clung to. I'm fine when you're not. I'm happy when you're dying inside. It forces you to face the ugly corners of your soul, the fears you've buried, the wounds you hide, the failures you deny. I was scared to tell the truth because I thought it'd wreck everything. My relationship, my image, my life. But then it hit me. The real death isn't losing someone or something. It's living a life that's not yours day after day until you don't even recognize yourself in the mirror. Peterson calls that hell, not dying, but the punishment of knowing you're faking it and too weak to stop. I felt that hell. Every night I'd lie down, and a tiny voice in my head would whisper, "You're wasting your life. You know it, so why don't you do something?" Do you hear that voice, or have you plugged your ears to block out the truth that you're fading away? The truth is bigger than happiness, and it's worth more than anything you've ever chased. Peterson doesn't promise you a life full of laughs or painless days. He says the truth leads to meaning, something deeper, tougher, more lasting than fleeting joy. I used to think happiness was the goal. If I kept the peace, made everyone happy, I'd be happy too. But happiness built on lies is like a sandcastle, pretty until the waves roll in and wash it away. The truth is solid rock, hard, cold, but strong enough to stand on and build something real. For me, meaning came when I stood up and said, "This is me, I'm not perfect, I'm scared, but I'm done pretending." That was the day I stopped running and started living, not an easy life, but a real one. Are you ready to pay the price for truth and find your meaning? Or are you still chasing sandcastles? Try this. Peel off the lies. Grab a notebook and a pen, not to jot down pretty words, but to dig up the truth. Sit down, breathe deep, and write this. Who am I lying to and about what? Don't rush with safe answers. Let your hand move. Let the truth spill out like blood from a cut. Maybe it's, I tell mom I'm fine, but I hate my job so much I want to scream. Or, I tell my friends I'm happy, but I'm so lonely I could vanish. Or, I tell my partner I don't need more, but I'm dying for them to really see me. Write until you've got nothing left. A page, 10 pages, a page soaked in tears. Then read it. Those are your chains, and now's the time to break them. Pick one lie to fix. Today, tell the truth once. For me, it was telling a friend, I don't want to hang out today. I'm tired, and I need to be alone. She didn't get mad. She hugged me and said, thanks for being real. The truth doesn't wreck, it connects. Where will you start? When I started living true, I was terrified, scared of rejection, scared of judgment. But then I saw the people who really love me don't need me perfect. They need me real, scars and all. Steven found strength in truth when he dropped his mask in his relationship. He said, when I started being real, that's when I connected with her for real. Me too. The day I spoke my truth, I didn't lose my partner. I found myself again. What about you? Do you want real connection, or are you okay staying a ghost in your own life? Your question, have you ever lied to keep someone happy? How did it make you feel? Lighter or heavier, like another chain around your neck? Write it down, even just a line. Next part, I'll tell you about persona. The mask Peterson warns can turn you into a puppet, dancing to someone else's tune. Are you ready to see who's pulling your strings? Part 3, persona. When you live a life that's not yours, are you a puppet, dancing to someone else's tune with invisible strings choking your neck until you can't breathe? Peterson calls it persona, and I was that puppet once until I cut the strings and fell into the abyss of myself, facing the truth that I'd lost who I was years ago. Picture this. You're on a big stage, lights blinding you, the crowd clapping loud, and you're smiling. A smile you've practiced, so much it's fake as hell. You say lines someone else wrote, step where they marked the floor playing a character you didn't pick. But when the lights go out, when the crowd's gone, you're alone in the dark and it hits you. This play isn't yours, you're just a puppet, and the strings yanking you around aren't in your hands. I lived like that for years. A fake smile on my face, a fake life in my heart, and a real pain I wouldn't admit. Do you hear the clank of strings around your neck? Or have you gotten so used to them you think they're part of you? Jordan Peterson, in that gut-wrenching talk with Steven Bartlett, ripped the lid off this monster called persona with a sharpness that chills you to the bone. He said, you're so wrapped up in feeling small and unsure that instead of letting people see the real you, shaky and scared, you play a part, a persona. Trouble is, someone might fall for that act, but there's no real bond there. It's all fake, and it'll eat you alive from the inside. His words smashed through, the flimsy shield I'd built to hide myself. I used to think if I was perfect, said the right things, did the right stuff, smiled at the right time, people would love me, need me, stick around. But then it hit me. They didn't love me. They loved the shell I made, a hollow, soulless thing that wasn't me. Are you living to please the crowd? Or have you forgotten this stage isn't your home? Persona isn't you, it's your jailer, whispering sweet lies that kill. Imagine walking into a room full of people, friends, co-workers, family, and flipping a switch. Your smile turns on, your voice goes soft, your hands move just right. I'm fine, you say, even though your heart's screaming you're not. I'm happy, you laugh, even though every step feels like dragging a mountain. That's persona, the mask you slap on to dodge judgment, to dodge hurt, to dodge facing that you don't know who you are anymore. I was a pro at that game. At work, I was the perfect worker. Always on time, always getting it done. Always nodding yes, even when I wanted to yell, I hate this, I don't want to live like this. At home, I was the perfect friend. Always listening, always cheerful. Even when I was dying of loneliness, no one saw. Are you wearing a mask? Or do you think it's your real face now? Carl Jung, the big shot shrink Peterson loves to quote, called persona a shell you need to fit into the world, like armor you throw on when you step outside. But if you never take it off, if you let it stick to your skin, it's not armor anymore. It's a coffin, burying you alive in your own body. That happened to me. I remember one night after a long day at work, sitting in my car, staring in the rearview mirror, asking, who am I? I didn't have an answer because persona had taken over, a shiny, perfect, empty version of me. Peterson warns, when persona is all you've got, the real you inside is desperate and miserable because nothing you show matches the truth deep down. I felt that misery, a black hole in my chest, spreading like ink, swallowing every spark of joy, every shred of hope. Do you feel that hole? Or are you patching it up with applause from people you don't even care about? Steven Bartlett, raw as hell, told Peterson, I used to try being what I thought they wanted in relationships, but when I ditched the persona, when I let them see the real me, weak, scared, messy, that's when things got solid. His words lit a fire under me, burning away my shell. In my old relationship, I played the ideal girl. Sweet, giving, never asking for anything. I didn't dare say I was lonely, that I needed to be loved differently, that I was breaking, but one night I couldn't take it anymore. I sat across from him, tears streaming down, and yelled, I'm not happy, I can't keep doing this. He froze, stunned, but then he hugged me, and for the first time I felt he saw me. Not the perfect act, but me, raw and hurting. Are you brave enough to drop the mask so someone can see the real you? Or are you scared they'll walk away when they see you're not the character they fell for? Who's pulling your strings? Peterson threw that question at me like a blade to the heart. If you're acting, who wrote your script? Who's yanking your strings? I used to think I was free to pick this job, this life, this love. But when I dug deep, I saw the strings, my parents' dreams of me settling down, my friends' pressure to make it big, my own dread that if I wasn't flawless, I'd be tossed aside. Those strings choked me every time I tried to break free, tight enough to stop my breath, to stop my life. Once my boss praised me for being so reliable, and I smiled, thanks. But inside I wanted to scream, I don't want to be reliable. I want to live real, live for me, not you. But I didn't. I bowed my head, let the strings pull me back to the stage. What about you? Who's pulling your strings? The world, your family, or your own fear? What happens when you live like this? It doesn't just steal your freedom, it robs you of your life's adventure, turning you into a walking corpse in your own skin. Peterson says, if you're not honest, you don't get the real journey. You get a role you've meekly accepted, and that sucks every drop of meaning out of you, leaving you hollow in a world with no color. I felt that. Every day was a blurry copy of the last. No joy, no fire, just surviving like a zombie. I used to dream of being a writer, telling stories that would leave a mark on the world. But I chose an office job instead, because it was the safe role, the one that got the most claps. Every night, lying in bed, a voice whispered, you're dying, and you know it. Do you hear that voice? Or have you shut it out so you don't have to face that you're living someone else's script? Try this, cut the strings and fall, grab a piece of paper and split it in two. On the left, write, what do I show the world? List the roles you play, hard worker, happy friend, perfect partner. On the right, write, what do I really feel? Spill the truth even if it hurts. I hate this job. I'm lonely despite the smiles. I'm miserable pretending. Then pick one role you're done with, just one. Today, cut its string. If you're always the cheerful one, tell a friend, I'm sad today and I need you to hear me. If you're always tough, admit to someone, I'm not okay and I need help. For me, it was telling my boss, I can't keep working late, I need time for me. He didn't fire me, he nodded and I felt one string snap. Which string will you cut? When I started ditching persona, I was terrified. Scared of rejection, scared of being judged, scared no one would love the real me. But then I saw, the people who matter don't need me perfect. They need me real, flaws and all. Peterson says going from persona to truth is a fight, but it's the only fight worth having, because you win your life back. For me, it started with saying no to stuff I used to say yes to just to keep people happy. What about you? Are you ready to cut the strings and fall, then stand up as you, even if it's messy? Your question, who's pulling your strings right? Now, write it down, a name, a fear, an expectation, and ask, am I brave enough to cut it? Next part, I'll take you into self-awareness. ready to stare into your own darkness? Part 4. The Journey of Self-Awareness. Seeing through yourself. If you don't know where you're weak, how can you ever get strong? That's the lesson Peterson drilled into me. And it wasn't a gentle walk. It was a brutal surgery with no painkiller, ripping my chest open to show me scars I'd buried under years of pretending. Imagine standing in front of a giant mirror. Not the kind you use to fix your hair, but a cold, unforgiving one that reflects every dark corner of your soul. The fears you've dodged, the failures you've ignored, the lies you've told yourself to stumble through life without facing, that you're fading away. I used to think I knew myself, that I was tough, unbreakable, always pushing forward, always okay. But then, one pitch black night, I followed Peterson's advice and sat down to ask myself the hard stuff, and it hit me. I didn't know who I was. That truth didn't just hurt. It stabbed me straight in the heart, dragging out blood and tears from years I'd thrown away. Jordan Peterson, in that raw, soul-shaking talk with Steven Bartlett, said with a voice deep like a growl from the shadows, "If you want to learn something about yourself, sit on your bed one night and ask, what am I doing wrong that I know about, that I can fix, and that I'm ready to fix? You'll get an answer. Not the one you want, but the one you need, and it'll hit you like a spear." His words weren't a soft nudge. They were an order, a scream from the edge of a cliff, forcing you to stare at yourself with no escape. I tried it, and the answer came crashing in like a storm. I was living to make everyone else happy, ditching my dreams because I was scared to fail, weaving a web of fakeness to hide the loneliness howling inside me like a caged animal. Are you brave enough to ask that question? Or are you too terrified the answer will shatter the fragile wall you've built to shield yourself? Self-awareness isn't a game. It's a bloody fight with yourself. It's not something you do to feel better. It's a war, a brutal clash where the enemy is the stuff you won't admit, the wounds you won't touch, the truths you won't face. I used to think I didn't need to dig into myself, that just getting by, working, smiling, being fine was enough to coast through life. But then, one quiet night I felt a black hole in my chest. Not just a passing emptiness like when you're sad or hungry, but a bottomless pit sucking away every bit of joy, every flicker of hope, every dream I'd ever had. Peterson says, if you don't know yourself, you can't grow. How do you fix something you don't even know is broken? And if you don't fix it, you're stuck in your own trap forever. I realized I was broken, not because I was weak, but because I wouldn't own up to that weakness. Are you stuck in your own trap? Or do you still think shutting your eyes will fix it all? Think of your life as an old, falling apart house. Outside, you slap on bright paint, big smiles, sweet words, shiny wins you show off to the world. But inside, the walls are cracked, the floor is rotting, and darkness fills rooms you're too scared to open. That was me before I started this journey. I hid the cracks with pretty lies. I'm fine. I'm happy. I don't need more. But then a storm hit. Not real rain, but the pain of losing my job, my love, my faith in myself. My house collapsed in a blink, and I stood in the wreckage, hands empty. No clue who I was or where to begin. I cried, not for what I'd lost, but because I saw I'd torn it down myself by refusing to fix it. Are you living in a house like that? A place that looks good outside, but inside's just shadows and denial? Peterson handed me a key, sharp enough to cut me before I could unlock anything. He says self-awareness starts with a simple, ruthless trick. Sit down, face yourself, and ask a real question. Not to feel good, but to dig up what you've buried. You've got to be desperate, he said, his voice cold as steel. Because this isn't a joke. This is your life, a life that can turn unbearable if you don't act. Ask, what am I doing wrong that I know about? I was desperate, not because I wanted to be, but because I had no other road left. I remember that night. I sat on my bed, killed the lights, and let the dark swallow me like a freezing blanket pressing on my chest. I whispered, what am I doing wrong that I know about? The air felt thick, like it was strangling me. The answer didn't come quick. It prowled in the shadows like a beast waiting for me to grow the guts to meet its eyes. Then it lunged, snarling. You're running from your dreams. You know you want to write, to create, to matter, but you're hiding in a dead-end job because you're scared to fail, scared to be mocked, scared no one cares. I didn't cry at first. I sat there, frozen, feeling like someone had torn my chest open to show me a bleeding mess. Then the tears fell, not from sadness, but because I knew it was true. A truth I'd buried under 1,000 excuses. Steven Bartlett, digging into this with Peterson, hit a nerve when he asked, "How do you build self-awareness if you don't even know you're missing it? It's a trap. If I don't know what I don't know, where do I start?" His question lit up my darkness. I'd thought I knew myself, but I was wrong. Peterson shot back, "Sit down and ask something real. Your life isn't what you want, and maybe not what it needs to be. Ask what's wrong. You'll see, even if you don't want to." I saw it, not in books or advice, but in the tears, soaking my pillow that night in the silent scream in my head. How many years have you wasted? Are you ready to sit down and ask? Or are you scared the answer's too heavy to carry, too sharp to hold? The truth hides in small, deadly things. Peterson says when you ask that question, the answer's not some grand fix like, "I need to change the world," or "I've got to ditch everything." It's usually little stuff, sharp like a needle, stabbing you and leaving a mark that won't stop bleeding. For me, it was, "You never clean this room properly because you think you don't deserve a decent space." Sounds silly, but when I got down on my knees with a broom, I cried. Not over the dust, but because I saw how long I'd neglected myself, how I'd convinced myself I wasn't worth a clean corner. Peterson says, people don't see God because they don't look low enough. I got it then. The truth's in the small stuff. A messy desk, a broken promise, a forgotten dream. Are you looking low enough to see your truth? Or are you still holding your head high, pretending those tiny cracks don't matter? Try this. Sit on your bed and dig. Tonight, take 20 minutes. No phone, no lights, just you and the dark. Sit on your bed, on the floor, anywhere you feel alone. Breathe deep. Feel the air rush in like an icy blast and ask, what am I doing wrong that I know about, that I can fix, and that I'm ready to fix? Don't expect something soft. It'll come like a knife, a punch, a howl from deep inside you. Don't run from it. Sit there. Let it soak in. Let it tear you apart. When it hits, write it down, even if your hand shakes, even if tears smear the ink. Then pick one small fix to start. Clean your desk, call someone you've ghosted, tell someone I'm not okay. For me, it was scrubbing my room, not just for tidiness, but to tell myself, you're worth this. Where will you start? When I kicked off this self-awareness trip, I was scared I'd find a monster inside me. But then I saw that monster wasn't my enemy. It was me, abandoned, forgotten, waiting for me to hug it close. Peterson says self-awareness is the door to growing. But to open it, you've got to step over a threshold of pain, brutal truth, nights full of tears. For me, that pain was owning up that I'd lived a life that wasn't mine, but it was also the start of finding myself again. What about you? Are you ready to cross that threshold even if it's soaked in blood and tears? Your question, are you brave enough to face the ugliest truth about yourself? Write down the first thing that pops up, even if it's terrifying, even if it makes you want to bolt. Next part, I'll tell you how I fought fear to break my limits. A journey Peterson calls doing everything you can to get tough as hell. Are you ready to grab your sword? Part 5. Fighting fear. Stepping beyond your limits, fear once made me ditch my own dreams. Until Peterson showed me that playing it safe is the cruelest enemy of growing. And I realized if I didn't push past fear, I'd stay locked forever, in a cage I built myself. Picture this. You're standing at an old, creaky wooden door, and behind it's the path to your biggest dream. A rough, shadowy road full of unseen ghosts waiting to pounce. Your hands on the knob, your heart's pounding like it's about to explode, but then a cold voice hisses in your head. Don't open it, stay here, it's safer, you're not strong enough. That's fear talking. Not some outside bully, but a shadow living inside you, tightening around your throat every time you think about breaking free. I heard that voice for years, and I chose to stay put. Not because I wanted to, but because I was terrified that if I opened that door, I'd fall into a pit and never climb out. Do you hear that voice too? Or have you let it lull you to sleep in your own prison? Jordan Peterson, in that fierce, soul-stirring talk with Steven Bartlett, said with a voice like thunder rolling, "When you're stuck, part of it's your own fault, but all you can do is every damn thing possible to put yourself in the toughest spot you can stand. If you don't face fear, you'll always be its victim." That wasn't a pat on the back, it was a sword slashing through me, making me see I'd let fear run my life. Steven, eyes burning with honesty, said, "I meet young folks who know who they want to be, but they pick the sheer misery of now. A job that sucks their soul dry, a relationship that traps them over the unknown ahead." His words rang in my head like a bell. I was one of those people knowing my dream but bowing to fear, letting it drag me down into a ditch of nothingness. Are you picking misery over the unknown? Or are you ready to face the dark to find yourself? Fear isn't just a feeling, it's a cage, and you're the one locking it. Imagine your life as an iron cell, not locked by someone else but by you, each bar forged from a fear. Fear of failing, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough, fear of people laughing. I lived in that cell for years, clinging to the safety of a job I hated, a life I didn't choose, because I was scared that stepping out would mean falling, and falling meant dying. I'd lie awake at night staring at the ceiling, dreaming of being a writer, spinning stories that hit people's hearts, leaving a mark on the world. But then fear would whisper, "You're not good enough. No one will care. You'll flop, and everyone will laugh." I believed it, not because it was true, but because it was easier than proving it wrong. Are you holding those bars tight? Or have you forgotten you've got the key to bust out? Peterson says fear's part of being human, but letting it rule you is a choice, and it's the weakest one you can make. Make a plan, he said, voice cutting like a blade. If you're trapped in a pointless job, break it down, what's wrong, why it's wrong, and what you can do to get out. Don't just sit there whining, move. That sliced into me deep. I was a whiner, hating my job, hating how it drained me dry, hating how it turned me into a lifeless machine, but doing nothing about it. Then one day I couldn't take it anymore. I looked in the mirror and saw a corpse staring back. Not me. I realized I'd rather crash and burn on my own path than rot in this cage. Are you ready to stare down the corpse fear's made you into? Fighting fear is a war, and you can't win without a weapon. Peterson doesn't just tell you to face fear. He gives you a battle plan, a map to claw your way through. He says when you're stuck, chop the problem into pieces. Study it like a scientist. Plan like a soldier and swing like you've got nothing to lose. For me, the problem was my job. A soul-sucking grind I despised so much that waking up each morning was a fist fight with myself. I took Peterson's advice. I sat down, grabbed a piece of paper, and wrote, "What do I hate about it? It's boring, meaningless, going nowhere. What do I want? To write, tell stories, live real." Then I asked, what do I need to get out? The answer cut me. A plan. Fix my resume, learn new skills, hunt for chances. Fear still lurked. You'll fail. You're not good enough. I had to fight it, not by running, but by staring it down. Are you ready to chop your fear into pieces? Or are you still letting it tower over you? Too big to touch. I remember the day I started. I fixed my resume, hands shaking as I typed, each word a step out of the cage. I was scared. Scared no one would hire me. Scared I wasn't good enough. Scared I'd flop hard. But Peterson says, get ready like a snake, sharp, ready to strike, eyes locked on the prize. I applied for a freelance writing gig, not because I knew I'd get it, but because I had to prove I could try. I got rejected. First time, second time, third time. Each no was fear laughing in my face. See, I told you. But then the fourth time I got a yes. Not a big deal, but enough to see light beyond the bars. I cried not from joy, but because I saw falling didn't kill me. I was tougher than I thought. Are you brave enough to apply for your dream, even if it means falling flat? Fear never goes away, but you can get tougher than it. Peterson says life isn't about killing fear, it's about stepping over it, even when your legs shake, even when your heart's pounding. For me, stepping over fear was quitting that job. I wrote my resignation, hands trembling so bad the words were a mess, and hit send. My boss called me in, asked, "You sure? You're giving up everything stable." I wanted to scream, "I don't want stable, I want to live," but I just said, "Yeah, I'm sure." Walking out of that office, I had nothing. No cash, no clear plan, just a dream and a fear still stalking me. But I felt light, not because fear was gone, but because I'd beaten it just that once. Are you ready to step over your door, even if it's into the dark? Try this. Plan your fight with fear. Grab a piece of paper and split it into 3 columns. Column 1. What am I scared of? Jot down your biggest fear holding you back. Failing at a new job. Leaving. A bad relationship. Not being good enough. Column 2. What's it doing to me? Spill the truth. It's making me live a life I hate. It's draining me dry. It's killing my dreams. Column 3. What can I do? Map it out. Fix my resume and apply somewhere new. Talk straight with them. Learn something new in 30 days. Pick one small step from column 3 and do it today. Even if your heart's racing. Even if your hands shake. For me, it was emailing that resignation. My first swing at the cage. For you, it might be saying no to something you always say yes to, or signing up for that class you've put off. Where will you swing first? When I pushed past fear, I didn't turn invincible. I fell, I cried, I freaked out. But every step was a crack in the old chains, and I felt alive. Not just surviving, but fighting. Peterson says, do everything you can to stand as tough as you can. Not because it's easy, but because it's the only way to live. For me, it was ditching safety to chase my dream. Not a smooth ride, but my ride. What about you? Are you ready to grab your sword and fight your fear, even if it's bloody and messy? Your question, what do you want to do but are scared of? Write it down, big or small, and ask, am I brave enough to take one step through this door? Next part, I'll tell you about meaning. Something Peterson says is bigger than happiness, something I found when I quit playing it safe to live real. Are you ready to hunt for your meaning? Part 6, Finding Meaning. Beyond happiness. Happiness is a sweet little note, gone with the breeze, but meaning is a whole symphony full of tears and triumphs. Peterson taught me that, and I learned that if I don't chase meaning, I'll wander forever in an empty life no matter how many smiles I fake. Imagine you're standing in a wide open field, no trees, no paths, just you and a gray sky pressing down on your shoulders. You're holding a tiny box. Inside is happiness. Quick joys, fleeting laughs, smiles you try to cling to. But then a gust rips it open. The box breaks and you're left with nothing. Realizing happiness can't fill the gaping hole in your chest. A hole so deep it screams for something bigger, something tougher, something real. I used to chase happiness. I thought if I had money, love, success, I'd be set. But when I got them, I still felt like a ghost drifting through my own life. No clue why I was even here. Do you feel that hole too? Or are you still stuffing it with things that vanish like smoke? Jordan Peterson, in that heart-heavy talk with Steven Bartlett, said with a voice deep like waves crashing on rocks, happiness isn't the target, it's a gift that comes and goes, something you can only hope for. Meaning's what you aim for, because it's deeper, bigger, and it holds up when life hurts. That wasn't a sugar-coated promise. It was a hard truth, a knife slicing through my fantasy that happiness was the finish line. Steven, honest as hell, asked, we always say, are you happy? But is that the wrong question? Is there something better to ask? Peterson shot back, ask, what are you doing? Because meaning lives in what you do, in facing life head on, not in feeling good for a minute. That hit me like a brick. I saw I'd spent years chasing little happy notes, too scared to play the full messy symphony of my life. Happiness is a cute lie, meaning is a bloody truth. Think of happiness as a piece of candy. You pop it in your mouth, it's sweet, and for a second, you smile. But then it's gone, and you're still hungry. Hungry for something deeper that won't melt away when the storms hit. I used to think if I got rich, if I had a nice house, if someone loved me, I'd be happy forever. I worked myself to death, made cash, bought stuff I didn't need, loved someone I didn't really know, all to grab that candy. But one day, sitting in my fancy apartment staring out the window, I felt a black void in my chest. Not sadness, not loneliness, but an emptiness so deep it was like my soul had slipped away without me noticing. I cried, not because I'd lost something, but because I saw happiness wouldn't save me. Are you chasing that candy? Or have you figured out it'll never fill you up? Peterson says meaning doesn't come from feeling good. It comes from staring pain in the face, standing tall in the storm and saying, I won't break. He talked about people he's met all over the world. They didn't come to him happy. They came crying, spilling their guts about despair, suicide thoughts, loss, hopelessness. But they thanked him because he helped them find meaning. Not by wiping out the pain, but by showing them it's part of a bigger song. I had a friend like that. She lost her kid and she told me, I'm not happy, but I keep going because I've got to keep her memory alive. That's meaning. Not smiles, not giggles, but the guts to stand up when everything's falling apart. Are you brave enough to find meaning in your pain? Or are you still running from it, hoping happiness will erase it all? Meaning is a mountain, and you've got to climb it even if your feet bleed. Peterson says, picture who you could be, then aim straight for it. For me, that mountain was becoming a writer, not for cash or fame, but to say what's in me, to touch someone's heart, to leave a mark time can't erase. Climbing's no picnic. I had to quit my steady job, face rejection after rejection, sit through long nights with a blank page, crying because I was scared I wasn't good enough. Peterson says meaning's in the climb, not the top, but every aching step you take, even through the dark. I remember the day I put out my first piece. No one read it, no one cared, but I felt a fire in me, not happiness, but meaning. I was living for what I believed in. Do you have a mountain? Or are you still at the bottom, too scared to climb? Steven told a story about turning down a 9-figure offer to sell his company. Not because he didn't want the money, but because he knew stopping would kill the meaning in his life. I felt empty, he said, voice shaky. I realized I needed a taller mountain to climb because that's what keeps me alive. That cut me deep. I used to think hitting a goal meant I could kick back and enjoy. But when I hit mine, good job, nice place, all I got was emptiness. Peterson says, you're not here to nap. You're here to live, to climb, to face life. I got it then. Meaning isn't the end. It's the sweat, the blood, the grind to become who you're meant to be. Are you ready to climb your mountain? Even if you can't see the top, meaning's bigger than you, and that's why it saves you. Peterson says the deepest meaning comes from a goal beyond yourself, something you'll never fully grab, but it pulls you through the dark. For me, it's writing to help others see themselves, not for applause, but so they find light in their pain like I did. One time after I put out a short story, a stranger messaged me, "Thank you." I cried reading it because I saw myself. I cried too, not from joy but from meaning. I'd reached someone even just once. Peterson says, meaning's the cure for pain, not because it stops the hurt, but because it makes the hurt worth it. Do you have a goal bigger than you? Or are you still living just to keep yourself happy? Try this. Find your mountain. Grab a piece of paper and write, if I could be anyone, who would I be? Don't think small. Go big, dig into what's buried in your heart. I want to help people through their pain. I want to make something that lasts. I want to live true. Then write, what's stopping me? List it out. Scared of failing, no time, not confident enough. Finally, write one small step to start climbing. Write a page a day. Sign up for a class. Tell someone the truth. For me, it was writing a short story and sending it out. Scared stiff, hands shaking, but I did it. Today, take your first step. Even if your feet bleed, even if your heart races. What's your mountain, and how will you climb it? When I started hunting meaning, I didn't find happiness right off. I found pain, tears, nights wrestling with myself. But I also found a fire, not a cozy glow, but a blazing roar of purpose. Peterson says, happiness is a gift, meaning's a fight. Fight for it because it's the only way to live. For me, meaning hit when I gave up easy street to chase my dream. Not a road of roses, but a path of thorns, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. What about you? Are you ready to fight for your meaning, even if it's messy and raw? Your question, is happiness really what you want, or do you crave something deeper? Write it down, even just a line, and ask, what's my mountain? Next part, I'll tell you about setting goals, how Peterson showed me to turn my dream into a sword for battling life. Are you ready to swing yours? Part 7. Setting goals. The warrior on your life's journey. If your life doesn't have a mountain to climb, you'll forever be a lost wanderer, drifting in the dark with no clue why you're even breathing. I learned this from Peterson, and it turned me from a walking corpse into a warrior swinging a sword at my own fate. Imagine waking up every morning on a foggy road. No signs, no end, just you and tired feet trudging nowhere. You're carrying a sword, sharp, gleaming, but you don't know what to do with it, because there's no enemy to fight, no peak to conquer. That sword is your potential, your strength, your passion, the stuff you were born to use. But without a goal, it'll rust in your hands, and you'll waste away in a haze of nothing. I was that wanderer, waking up to a job I hated, a life I didn't pick, and an emptiness clawing at my chest. What the hell am I doing here? Are you lost too? Or are you still holding a sword you don't know how to swing? Jordan Peterson, in that fiery, gut-punching talk with Steven Bartlett, said with a voice like a battle cry, picture who you can be, then aim straight for it. Not some fluffy daydream, but a real goal. A mountain you'll climb, even if your feet bleed, even if the wind screams to knock you down. That wasn't a suggestion, it was a command, a roar from the battlefield, daring you to grab your weapon and fight. Stephen, eyes blazing with hunger, asked, but what if they know who they want to be and still won't move? Because of fear, because of the unknown? Peterson fired back, make a plan. Life's not wishing, it's strategy, grit, step-by-step moves to beat fear and take that mountain. That sliced me open. I'd known who I wanted to be for years, but I wouldn't set a goal, wouldn't swing my sword because I was scared of falling, scared of failing, scared my mountain was too damn high to touch. A goal isn't a dream. It's the sword you forge to slice through your chains. Think of your life as a war zone, not a sunny field of flowers, but a jagged wasteland full of thorns, where the enemies are fear, doubt, and stalling. You were born to fight, not to sit still, not to wait around, but to grab a sword and hack through the dark. I used to see goals as far-off stuff. I want to be a writer, I'd tell myself, but I didn't do a thing because I never made it a sword. I left it there, a dusty dream, while I slogged through a dull life, punching a clock at a job that drained me dry, day after day like a zombie with no soul. Peterson says, a goal's what you shoot for, not to hit right away, but to yank you out of your own swamp. I saw then, without a goal, I'd sink forever in that swamp, not because I was weak, but because I wouldn't forge my blade. Do you have a sword, or are you letting it rust in the corner? I forged my sword, and it was sharp enough to cut me before I swung it. Peterson says setting a goal is real work. Not wishing, but breaking it down, mapping it out, moving like a warrior. For me, the goal was to be a writer, not some vague idea, but a clear path. Write books, tell stories, hit people's hearts. I sat down with a piece of paper and followed his lead. I wrote my mess. I hate this job. It's repetitive, pointless, dead end. I want to write, but I don't know where to start. Then I dug in. I'm short on skills, time, guts. Next, I planned, I'll learn to write every day, ditch this job, send stuff out even if it flops. Fear still crept up. You'll crash. No one cares. But I grabbed my sword. I wrote my resignation. hands shaking so bad the letters were a scribble, and hit send. When my boss asked, "You sure?" I wanted to yell, "I'd rather die than stay like this." But I just said, "Yeah, I'm sure." My sword was forged, not to kill anyone, but to cut the chains holding me back. Are you ready to forge yours, even if it slices you first? Peterson says your goal's gotta be big, not to grab right off, but to drag you through the dark. You want a goal you'll never fully reach, he said, because it'll make you get up every day, even when you're beat, even when you want to quit. For me, the big goal was writing a book that changes someone's life. Not to sell millions, but so one person reads it and says, "I'm not alone." I started small, a page a day, even when my hands shook, even when I was scared no one would care. Some nights I sat at my desk, tears falling because I thought I sucked, but I kept writing. Not because I was good, but because that goal was bigger than me, bigger than my fear. One day I sent a short story to a magazine. It got rejected, but I didn't stop. I sent more, and the 5th time they took it. I cried, not from joy, but because my sword felt sharper. Do you have a big goal? Or are you sticking to tiny hills because falling from high up scares you? A goal's your mountain, and you're the warrior climbing it. Steven talked about young people he's met. They know what they want, but won't climb because fear blinds them. Peterson snapped back. Plan it out step by step. Life's a war. Fight like a warrior, not a loser crying about it. I learned that the hard way. When I quit my job, I had nothing. No money, no sure thing, just a goal and a sword I'd forged myself. I made a plan. Write 500 words a day. Learn from better writers. Pitch stuff even if it flops. Some days, I wanted to give up. After my 10th rejection, I slammed my fist on the table, yelling, "You can't do this." But then I remembered Peterson. You don't climb to stand on top, you climb to become the one who can. I got up, wrote more, and every word was a swing at fear. Are you ready to map out your mountain, even if each step stings like walking? On nails? Try this. Forge your sword and climb. Grab a piece of paper and split it into 3 parts. Part 1. Who do I want to be? Write your biggest goal, a writer, someone who helps others, someone real. Part 2. What do I need to get there? List it out. Practice writing 30 minutes a day. Quit this job in 6 months. Tell my family the truth. Part 3. What's my first step? Pick one small move for today. Write 100 words. Look for a course. Send that email to quit. For me, it was 100 words. I sat down, hands shaky, but I wrote, and that was my first swing. Today, forge your sword. Pick one step and do it, even if your heart's pounding, even if fear's yelling. Where will you swing first? When I set my goal, I didn't turn into a hero overnight. I fell, I cried, I doubted myself. But every step chipped away at the old chains, and I felt alive. Not drifting, but fighting like a warrior. Peterson says, a goal's the mountain that pulls you through hell. Not because you'll stand on top, but because you'll become the one who can climb it. For me, it's writing, not to win, but to become who I was born to be. What about you? Are you ready to grab your sword and climb your mountain, even if it's bloody and rough? Your question, what's your mountain? Write it down, no matter how high, and ask, will I forge my sword today? Next part, I'll tell you about tech and losing yourself. How Peterson warned me if you don't swing your sword right, it'll stab you back. Are you ready to hold it tight? Part 8, Technology and Alienation. Keeping your feet on the ground in a virtual world, that phone in your hand could be a double-edged sword. Peterson warned me, and I felt the freezing. Loneliness smacked me in the face, even surrounded by a virtual crowd, like a stranger lost in a house I built from lifeless screens. Imagine you're standing in a city blazing with light, neon signs flashing, your phone buzzing with notifications, messages, likes, and comments flooding in like a non-stop wave. You grin, fingers sliding over every word. But when the glow fades, when the screen goes black, you're alone in the dark. No one beside you, no one really seeing you, just you and a cold emptiness clawing at your heart. I used to think tech was my buddy. It gave me connection, news, instant fun. But then I saw It's not a friend, it's a ghost. A sharp blade that can carve me up if I don't learn how to grip it. Do you feel lonely in that online buzz? Or are you still hugging that sword thinking it'll save you? Jordan Peterson, in that wake-up call talk with Steven Bartlett, said with a voice heavy like an alarm bell, "Tech's a wild power. We don't know enough to copy the real world online without losing something vital. It can lift you up, but if you're not careful, it'll drag you into a pit of disconnection." That wasn't a soft tip. It was a shout from the edge of a war zone where people are losing themselves to glowing screens. Steven, Bear, and Honest said, "I hate working remote. The office was where I found friends, love, real bonds. Now it's all screens, and I'm scared for the kids growing up without that." His words punched me hard. I'd lived in that virtual world, scrolling social media for hours, texting friends I'd never met, but every night shutting it off, I felt like a dead shell floating in a chilly void, unseen, uncared for. Tech isn't just a tool, it's a shadow that can swallow you whole. Picture sitting in a tiny room, just you and your phone. You swipe through posts, videos, chats, each one a quick hit of sweetness, a jolt of fun. But when you stop, the room's empty, no voices, no warmth. I was hooked on tech. I lived through that screen, posting pics for likes, texting to feel less alone, watching clips to drown out the hole in my chest. But one day, after 3 hours of scrolling, I caught my reflection, blank eyes staring back. Not me, but a shadow of me, a shell that had lost itself in the digital haze. Peterson says, we don't get our real world enough to rebuild it online without missing something alive. I saw what I'd missed, real connection, a look in the eye, a hand to hold, laughter you hear in the air, not through earbuds. Are you living through a screen, or do you still think those likes will plug that hole in your heart? What's alienation? It's your soul dying slow in a fake world. Peterson warns tech can pull you away from yourself, from your body, your feelings, the people around you. I felt that. Texting friends instead of seeing them, working on Zoom instead of sitting with coworkers, loving through apps instead of locking eyes. Every time, I felt my soul thin out, like a paper tearing, bit by bit. I remember one day, after hours of remote work, I turned off my laptop and sat in silence. No sound, no voices, just me, and a cold loneliness wrapping around me like a wet rag. I cried, not from sadness, but because I realized I was fading, away in my own home, and tech was the blade I'd plunged into my own chest. Peterson says, tech cuts you off from what you make, from the real world. Do you feel cut off? Or are you still gripping that blade, blind to how it's bleeding? You dry? Steven shared his fear for the young ones. Dating screens, friends or screens, work screens, we're losing the places to really connect. That slammed me like a fist. I'd met a guy through an app, thought sweet texts were enough to build love. But when we met, I saw I didn't know him, he didn't know me, we just knew our online shadows. Peterson says, we don't know how to stay grounded with tech. It's too big, too new, and we're not wise enough to tame it. I got that if I didn't set limits, I'd drift forever in that fake world. No warmth, no truth, just ghosts dancing on a screen. Are you drifting there too? Or do you still think it's your home? Tech's a sword, and you've got to hold it right. Peterson doesn't say ditch tech. He says wield it like a warrior, not a slave. For me, that sword was my phone. I'd let it boss me around, dragging me into hours of mindless scrolling, replacing real talks with quick chats. But I decided to grip it my way. I set rules. No phone after 9 p.m., no social media on weekends, time with friends face-to-face instead of texts. The first time I saw a friend after months of just messaging, I hugged her, and I cried, not from sadness, but because her warmth beat any text I'd ever gotten. Peterson says, keep your feet on the ground, use tech, don't let it use you. I learned it's a tool, not my master. I've got to hold the sword, not let it stab me. Are you brave enough to grip your sword, or are you still letting it cut you? Try this. Take back your ground. Grab a piece of paper and write. What's tech doing to me? List it out. It makes me lonely even when I'm online. It steals my time, it kills real connection. Then write, what do I want? Real friends, slow living, feeling the world. Finally set one limit. No phone after 8 p.m. Meet a friend once a week. Turn off notifications for a day. For me, it was no phone one night. I sat in quiet, heard the wind outside, and for the first time in months I felt alive. Today, grab your sword, pick a limit and stick to it, even if the silence scares you, even if loneliness creeps in. Where will you start? When I started taming tech instead of letting it tame me, I didn't shake off loneliness right away, but I found real moments, friends' laughs, a family handshake, my own breathing. Peterson says, tech can wreck everything if you're not smart. Hold it like a warrior, not a puppet. For me, it's keeping my feet planted, not ditching tech, but owning it to live true. What about you? Are you ready to grip your sword and stand solid even if the virtual dark howls at you? Your question. Have you ever felt lost even when you're always online? Write it down, just a line, and ask, how will I hold my sword? Next part, I'll tell you about listening. How Peterson showed me real strength isn't in talking, but in staying quiet to hear someone else. Are you ready to listen? Part 9. Listening. The power to change others. I used to try fixing my friend with advice, but Peterson taught me listening's the real key. And it pulled our friendship back from the edge when I saw that staying quiet to hear her was stronger than 1,000 words. Imagine you're sitting across from a close friend, her eyes red and wet, her voice trembling as she spills the pain tearing her apart. But instead of hearing her out, you jump in, tossing out fixes, pushing your ideas like a bitter pill she's got to swallow. You think you're helping, but when she turns away, you see a wall rise up between you. A wall of distance, of feeling unseen. I was that wall builder. I'd talk, I'd advise, I'd try to patch people up, but every word I threw out was a knife I didn't mean to stab, pushing them further from me. Peterson hit me with a brutal truth. If you don't listen, you can't help anyone. You're just killing the real bond. Are you building walls with the people you love? Or do you still think your words are the only way to crack their shell? Jordan Peterson, in that Heart Raw Talk with Steven Bartlett, said with a voice deep like an echo from a cave, if you want to help someone, don't dish out advice. Listen to them. Really listen, with honesty and no clue what's best, because that's how they open up and find their way. That wasn't a gentle nudge. It was a hammer smashing my delusion that I could fix people with my chatter. Steven, honest, to the bone, asked, how do we lift someone up without shoving our stuff on them, without making them feel small? Peterson shot back, ask real questions, not to steer them, but to get them. Listening's your biggest strength, because it gives them room to breathe. That sliced me open. I saw I'd tried changing people out of fear of losing them, but my not listening was what drove them off. Listening isn't just sitting there, it's opening your heart to carry their pain. Picture this, you're with a friend and they're pouring out the mess trapping them. Losing a job, a broken love, or just feeling lost in their own skin. You want to say, do this, cheer up, I've got the answer. But you stop, stay quiet, and let their words flood over you like a wild river. Messy, heavy, unstoppable. You don't fix, don't judge, just hear. And in that moment, your chest feels tight, like you're hauling their hurt on your back. I didn't know how to listen. Once, when my friend vented about hating her job, I cut in. Why don't you quit? I'll help you find something. She went silent, then left, and I didn't get why. Later, she told me, I just wanted you to hear me, not fix me. It hit me. I wasn't helping. I made her feel tiny, like her pain wasn't worth my time. Have you ever cut someone off? Or do you still think your fixes matter more than their hurt? Peterson says listening's an art, not just shutting up, but being there, soaking in their words without plastering yourself over them. When you listen, he said, they'll untangle themselves, not because you're a genius, but because you give them space to breathe. I learned that through tears. After that fight with my friend, I asked her to meet again. I sat there, quiet, as she talked about loneliness, failure, despair. I wanted to jump in, to patch it up. But I bit my lip, letting her words wash over me like a flood. When she stopped, she cried and said, "Thanks for not saying anything, I feel lighter." I cried too, not from sadness, but because I felt the power of silence. It didn't just save our friendship, it saved me from my own arrogance. Are you brave enough to stay quiet and hear, even if it weighs you down like the world? We can't help if we don't listen, and not listening is a crime. Peterson told stories of strangers he's met on the street. They'd come up, tears streaming, sharing their pain, suicidal thoughts, grief, desperation. I asked their name. He said, "I listen, and in 10 seconds they tell me what I need to know, because they've got something to say and they need someone to hear it." That cut me deep. I used to think helping meant giving advice, showing I was smart, but I was wrong. I remember once my little brother sat in his room, head down, talking about school stress. I jumped in. "Study like this, do that." He got up, slammed the door, and I heard him crying behind it. I didn't help. I shoved him deeper into the dark because I didn't listen. Later, I knocked, sat down, and said, "I'll just hear you. Talk." He cried, spilled his exhaustion, his fear, and when he stopped, he hugged me, saying, "Thanks, bro." I saw listening isn't fixing. It's standing with them in their hell. Have you pushed someone away by not hearing them? Or do you still think your words are the only cure? Listening's a warrior's strength, not a weakling's dodge. Peterson says real listening means dropping your ego, letting go of wanting to control, to look clever, to force your way. You've got to come in blind, he said, because you don't know what they need, only they do. I learned that the hard way. When my partner opened up about fearing his mom's death, I used to butt in. "Don't worry, it'll be okay." He'd go quiet, eyes dimming, not from grief, but because I didn't hear him. Next time, I sat down, held his hand, and said, "Tell me, I'm here." He cried, talked about his pain, his terror, and when he finished, he hugged me tighter than ever. I didn't fix him. I listened, and in that silence, I felt power. Not the power to win, but to stand beside him. Are you brave enough to ditch your ego and hear, even if it leaves you feeling helpless? Try this. Listen like a warrior. Today, pick someone, a friend, family, your partner, and sit with them. Say, "I want to hear you. How are you?" Then shut up. No advice, no fixing, no interrupting. Let their words roll over you, even if they hurt, even if they're heavy. If they ask, "What do you think?" say, "I don't have all the answers, but I want to get you. What do you need?" For me, I did it with my mom. She talked about her tiredness, her loneliness, and I just listened. When she stopped, she grabbed my hand, saying, "You didn't have to say a thing, that's enough." Today, listen, even if your heart's heavy, even if you itch to talk. Who will you hear? When I started listening, I didn't turn into a know-it-all. I became someone who stays, who carries others' pain without buckling. Peterson says, listening's your strongest tool to change someone, not because you're great, but because you give them room to change themselves. For me, it saved bonds I nearly lost, not with words, but with silence. What about you? Are you ready to listen to change someone, and maybe change yourself too? Your question, did you really listen to someone today? Write it down, a name, a moment, and ask, am I brave enough to stay quiet and hear them? Next part, I'll wrap it up. How Peterson showed me to live a life worth living with, the sword I forged. Are you ready to live real? Part 10. Conclusion. Living a life. Worth living life's a bloody war, but you can be the warrior. Peterson handed me a sword, and now I'm passing it to you, daring you. Will you pick it up and live real, or let it rust in the shadows of your cowardice? Picture this. You're standing on a sprawling battlefield, not a sunny meadow, but a rough wasteland choked with thorns, smoke stinging your eyes, the roar of unseen enemies echoing, fear, fakeness, stalling. In front of you lies a sword, not shiny like in the movies, but rugged, heavy, stained with the blood of fights you've dodged. You can grab it, swing at the darkness and stand tall in the storm. Or you can turn away, head down, and live forever as a shadow in your own story. I was that shadow, waking up with a fake smile, slogging through a job I hated, loving someone I didn't get, telling myself, it's all fine, while my heart screamed, you're dying. But Peterson showed me how to grip that sword, and I fought not to win, but to live. Will you grab yours? Or are you still letting it sit there gathering dust in your fear? Jordan Peterson, in that soul-shaking talk with Steven Bartlett, said with a voice like thunder cracking, life's not a dream, it's a fight, and you've got to battle to make it worth living. Be real, set goals, face the pain, because that's the only way to keep from falling into your own hell. That wasn't a soft pat, it was a call to arms, a bellow from the war zone forcing me to stare at the mess I called my life and decide, will I stand up or rot here? Steven, eyes wet with truth, said, I promise to live real, not to please anyone, but to do the best I can with the time I've got. That stabbed my heart. I saw I'd wasted years making others happy, running from myself, living a life that wasn't mine. But now I've got my sword, and you can too. Living a life worth living isn't about happiness, it's about meaning, and meaning comes from the fight. Think of your life as a symphony, not a catchy tune over in minutes, but a long, wild piece with low notes that hurt, fierce chords that shake you, and highs that bring tears. Happiness is just a quick note, nice but gone fast. Meaning's the whole damn song, messy, bloody, but worth it. I used to chase happiness. I thought if I had cash, love, success, I'd be good. But when I got them, I was still a hollow shell drifting in a cold void. No purpose, no fire. Peterson taught me meaning comes from facing pain, from ripping off the persona mask, seeing my raw self, aiming for goals bigger than me, listening to others instead of preaching. Are you ready to play your symphony, even if it's full of tears and blood? This journey's the sword I forged, and now it's yours. Looking back at what Peterson and Steven gave me, I see a path. Not an easy stroll, but a warrior's trail. Part 1. I learned to ask, who am I? Facing the dark to find truth. Part 2. I learned to live real, ditching the mask to reclaim me. Part 3. I learned about persona, cutting strings to stop being a puppet. Part 4. I learned self-awareness, staring at my flaws to get stronger. Part 5. I learned to fight fear, stepping through doors even when I shook. Part 6. I learned to find meaning, climbing a mountain bigger than happiness. Part 7. I learned to set goals, forging a sword to conquer my life. Part 8. I learned to tame tech, gripping the blade so it doesn't cut me. Part 9. I learned to listen, staying quiet to connect for real. Each lesson was a swing at the old chains, and now I'm here, not winning, but living true. I'm writing this not to brag. I'm handing you the sword. I've fallen, cried, wanted to quit, but every time I got up, because living worth it isn't never falling, it's refusing to stay down. What have you picked up from this ride? Or are you still waiting for someone else to swing your sword? Living worth it means grabbing your sword and fighting, not for others, but for you. Peterson says, you're not here to sleep, you're here to live, to climb, to face hell and walk through it. For me, the fight was ditching my soul-sucking job to write, not to hit it big fast, but to become who I was meant to be. I remember sending out my first book. It got rejected, and I sat in my room, tears falling, thinking, you screwed up. But then Peterson's voice rang. You fight not to win, but to become a warrior. I got up, rewrote it, sent it. Again, third time it got picked up. I cried, not from victory, but because I felt alive and swinging my sword. Are you brave enough to grab yours even if it's heavy, even if it cuts you? Try this. Promise to live worth it. Take a piece of paper and write, why do I want my life to matter? Don't think small, go big. I want to leave a mark. I want to help someone. I want to be real. Then write, what'll I do today? One tiny step. Write a page. Tell someone the truth. Cut one string. For me, it was that first page. Hands shaky, heart racing, but I wrote, "Today, pick up your sword. Choose one step and do it, even if you're scared, even if you tremble." Last, make a promise to yourself. I'll live real, not to make anyone happy, but to do the best I can with the time I've got. Write that promise, stick it on your wall, and live it. Where will you start? As I finish this journey, I'm not promising you an easy ride. I'm promising you a fight worth having. Peterson says, living true doesn't make life light. It makes it mean something. And that's all you need to dodge your own hell. For me, living worth it is writing, not for fame, but to reach someone to say, "You're not alone. I've fallen, sobbed, nearly quit. But I stood up because this sword's mine and I'm not dropping it." What about you? Are you ready to grab your sword and live a life worth living, even if it's bloody, even if it's raw? Your final question: where will you start to make your life worth living? Write it down, one word, one line, one promise, and ask, will I swing my sword today? This isn't the end, it's the start of your fight. Pick it up, warrior, life's waiting.